to get started, we've got an action-packed full meeting tonight. That should be really interesting. Susan Joe, a member of our green
It's like
team.
she's talking.
Council and will be leading the presentation. And so I just want to get the meeting started. And this is a meeting, well, I should say, welcome to everybody in here, out there, around the world. I'm your host, Stephen Colvin. Yeah, and this is Mickey Norris. I'm the chair of the Cleanup and Beautification Subcommittee of the Health Department Advisory Council. So as I said, we have a very special presentation tonight. Sue had asked me to give a history of some of the local groups that are here in our area that you might want to plug into, working or get involved with.
Would you just 1 second? Yeah, I'd like to sort of kick it off with a big ticket. And also tell people that up on the, you can see up there a QR code.
Good idea. Good idea. Thank you.
I wanted to let you know that there's a QR code up there. So there's wildly more information than you can possibly take in one evening. And even though I'm a teacher, I'm going to resist the urge to like give you a quiz afterwards. But that's how you can find the entire slideshow with all of the links in it. So what I'm going to be doing today, El Sobrante Green Teams Go Global, are a unique opportunity to make an even bigger difference. And I've been doing a master's degree in conservation science. And a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is sort of a quick summary of some of the stuff that I've learned from doing research, from papers, from academic papers, because there is so much doom out there and there's so much irrational hope out there, and who knows where the actual reality is, because it turns out that the truth of actually what science has to say about this is our best shot at being able to predict the future and to be able to do something effective about it. It doesn't always make for the best storyline. And that's why you get stuff that tends to be either one side or the other. There's a documentary saying there's only 60 harvests until we all starve to death, which is a real attention grabber. But it turns out to not be entirely accurate like that. So we're going to be looking at some stuff that hopefully will make things feel a little bit more hopeful today. And we have a unique opportunity, and I'm going to be basically talking about how we have a community with a tremendous and growing amount of social capital. We're going to be talking about our connection to nature and why and how we care about it, how it's calming for us, and how this actually sets us up to get out there into the hurly-burly world, to do something about it and still be able to come and recharge our batteries. We're near to affordable houses and near to jobs, and many of us are at a stage in our lives where we actually have some amount of money, some amount of time, some amount of confidence that we can use to influence legislation. And these things together, along with making a visible difference, which is what we're doing in so many of our green teamed and green associated kinds of environmental community groups. We start off by doing seemingly small things like picking up trash. But oh my gosh, the difference it's made. And it turns out that that first step is like the activation energy in a chemical world. You have to take that first step. And once you've done that, you are much more likely take the next steps and to actually push things forward, not just for ourselves, but for our children and our grandchildren and the ecosystem that we absolutely love. And so I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to be analytical. So I'm going to be going on each of these things and getting several people to help me today. Mickey's going to be talking about the environmental types of organizations. And I think that we have a fair number of people from those different organizations. And we have Donald Baston, the author of this book, which is the history of El Sobrante, to tell us a little bit more about where we've come from, how this community was formed. We have Rose Samuelson, who is an ecologist with the East Bay Parks, talking about our own ecosystem here. And later on, we're going to have John Joyer to come and talk a little bit about how to influence people like him, people who are legislators and elected officials. So I hope that that gives us a quick overview. And so next slide, please. So now I'm going to hand it over to Mickey.
Okay. So Sue had asked me to give a little overview of some of the green groups in our area. And so I'd like to start with our very own Green Team 94803. Who has participated with the Green Team 948? Raise your hand. Yay, yeah, a lot of you. So thank you for coming, everybody, and thank you for being a part of what we're trying to do. Well, the Green Team started out as the El Sobrante Valley Green Teams by Maurice Abraham in 2015. The focus was just on the downtown area, the public sidewalks, the gutter areas, parking lots, with the goal of intercepting the litter before it works its way down to the creeks and into the ocean, and to improve the business curb appeal as well. He was a real visionary with big plans to really clean up and beautify this area. And I'm so sorry I never got to meet this man. They originally set up 4 teams to clean up on first and third Saturdays of every month. And they picked up litter once every 2 months. I mean, each team picked it up every month, once every 2 months. They had about 33 volunteers. And sometimes they pick out weeds and strew around poppy seeds like the mom does. The green teams were sponsored by the El Sobrante Chamber of Commerce and was a part of the Chamber's beautification committee. The Chamber provided the equipment, vests, bags, buckets, grabbers to get them started. And we've since then accumulated more equipment to make sure that we can accommodate everybody in our great events that we have. So when Maurice was diagnosed with cancer in 2017, he had to step back, and Holly Ann Trevo and stepped up to take over. And Ken Cheney, who is with Citizens for Greener El Sobrante, stepped up and offered to manage the equipment. So you'll see him out there with his van on the 3rd Saturday cleanups. And he also led kayak cleanups on the reservoir, picking up trash there. That sounded fun. But yeah, I know people want to get back to that. And he, but sadly, Maurice passed away in 2019, right around the time when we started getting involved with the Green Team. Chris and I went to our first cleanup in 2019, and then we saw that Adrian Lambert put up a message on Nextdoor and formed the El Sobrante neighborhood cleanup group. We started organizing using Nextdoor. He made me a co-administrator. The first thing we did was change the time from 9 to 10 because 9 was too early for me. I wasn't going to make it then, but I could make it at 10. And to expand the areas beyond the downtown to cover the major arteries of our area, so that when we're driving around, we can, have the benefit of seeing nice, cleaner streets and without the litter that was really accumulating. We moved the meeting place from Walgreens parking lot over to the parking lot here, and we start every Saturday at 10 o'clock and do it for 2 hours. And but we really have a great core group of people, and many of you are here today. And without them, it wouldn't be happening. Some of our members of the Green Team have also taken care of the planters along San Pablo Dam Road in the business district. Thank you. Beth is spearheading that one with Monica and
Just trying to not destroy what Dorcas created.
yeah, Beth is, yeah, she created something, but check it out when you drive by or walk by because the planters are looking really beautiful right now. Put a lot of energy into it, they all have. And Ramon has been working, cleaning up graffiti along the street as well. And so the green team now has third Saturday cleanups every third Saturday. It's starting at 10. We co-sponsor 2 major cleanups a year. Earth Day, which we just had in April, which was a really nice event, a bigger event. We try to bring in the whole community to that. We bring in the whole community for the whole thing. But we make it a special effort to put on a really nice Earth Day. And along with Spawner and Anthony's Richmond and the library and John Lawyer's office and the Chamber of Commerce. And we invite the community to clean up the streets and the police at that point, have info tables, entertainment and food. So it's really nice to see that we are making a difference in this community from when we started to now. You can drive around and not get so aggravated like I usually do, but it's looking so much better. I feel like we're making a difference. So, and then we're a great group. In fact, we participate in the stroll and parade as well, and we've gotten recognized for our high spirit at the parade. So you can find out more about the Green Teams. Chris created a website, keepelsobrante.info, as a resource to give people the information they need or have to dispose of their junk or stuff they want to get rid of, and we have it on the back of this postcard. Yeah, so that people will get rid of things in a responsible manner, and also the website connects other groups. And we're willing, we're happy to put links to the other groups that are involved too and making a difference here. So next up is spawners, and I know Martha is here and she could probably, I'm sure she'll do a much better job of telling you more about what they do than what I found on their website. But spawners stand for San Pablo Watershed Neighbors Education and Restoration Society. So it's easier just to say spawners. And you find us on SPAWNERS. The website is on there. I don't know if you can read it, but it's up there. It was formed in the spring of 2000 when they brought together about 90 local residents to remove invasive ivy and trash from the creek banks at the Sobrante Library. From there, their scope has grown to include restoring creek banks, removing invasive plant species, planting native species, hosting educational programs for students and adults, monitoring creek water quality, and making sure that all interested parties can learn about and appreciate the San Pablo Creek watershed. They currently also meet the third Saturday of every month at 9:30, and they're actively restoring Wilkie Creek, the Wilkie Creek site by Deanza High School. So see Martha after if you want to get involved with that.
I just want to add one more thing.
Yes, go ahead.
Just so you know, when we started, everything out the back here was ivy. From the back, there was a little service driveway back there, and everything was covered with ivy. And the first thing we did was take the ivy off the tree. We had ivy trunks this big that were going up the trees.
Which is important to do because it could kill you.
Yes, the ivy will kill the trees eventually.
And it looks pretty, but it's not.
Well, it looks okay. I mean, it's boring.
Yeah, I mean, it looks pretty bad.
So do you still do every Thursday, every fourth Thursday, the library area, or no?
Yeah, we're here the fourth
Every
Thursday.
fourth Thursday and
And then
third
third Saturday.
Saturday at Wilkie Creek.
At Wilkie, yeah.
Oh, you do.
They do,
third-
they
fourth
do
Saturdays
twice a month.
here?
We
Yes,
don't advertise. in public events.
Yeah.
We are here once a month, maintaining the library back. And it was because we had planted the native plant demonstration garden that when the library landscaping had to be done, they went with an all native plants for the whole library.
And it's actually a lovely way to get inspiration for your own gardens, to look at here and see what's doing
it's
well.
great.
Okay. So, thank you, Martha. And I hope you get involved with that, especially if you like going around things. Okay, the next group of, the Citizen for Greener El Sobrante. They were founded in 2011, and it comprised community members of the El Sobrante Valley working toward a greener, more living El Sobrante. And their mission is to strategize and partner in the implementation of sustainable practices that beautify El Sobrante and strengthen our economic corridors, environmental health, and community spirit. They've done different things around homelessness and the walkability designs. They helped to bring elm trees, I believe, to the area lining downtown. And they were involved in having parklets down there. And I think it kind of got stalled. I think they're hoping to bring it back during the pandemic days, the long ago days. But they are also currently involved with trying to bring a community park to the Maori property, that old little gas station next to the Bank of America site in the back there, to have creek access to everybody and to give everybody, you know, a park here. So they are very involved with that. So I hope you'll check them out. The Good Table and Planting Justice, the Reverend Melinda McLean, who's also a MAC member with us here, and her partner Pauline Roger, the Good Table, got together with Gavin Raiders of Planting Justice to form the Good Table LLC to save our community from another gas station when the Adoptee Nursery closed down. So they bought that property in 2019 with a vision to create a cafe and community meeting space and an organic tree and plant nursery. They're currently under construction and have work parties for volunteers to build up that space last Saturday of every month from 12 to 3. Hope you join them for that. And they hope to open it by the end of the year. That would be great. They have recently brought the farmers market to El Sobrante every Sunday from 12 to 4, right in front of the Good Table at the old Adoptee property on Sobrante Avenue, which is growing and growing. And Planting Justice's mission is to empower people who are impacted by mass incarceration and social inequities with skills and resources to cultivate food, economic justice, and community healing. So their plan is to hire a lot of these people that have a hard time getting jobs these days, and you know, get them, you know, involved and creating a living for themselves. And this is going to create a community meeting space for us. Triangle Works, Triangle Works. On the Good Table Planting Justice site, you will find the shed, a project of Triangle Works, and we have Heather here who probably talk to her more about that. But it's also comprised of local residents working to bring community, creativity, and resiliency to our El Sobrante Richmond neighborhood. They recently completed that community mural project on Fran Way and Appian Way, which is just beautiful. I think they did an excellent job on that, bringing the community to help paint it. And the shed houses a workshop, classroom space, and a maker's market for local artisans to display works for sale. And their plan is to offer more and more classes and workshops, various kinds of arts and crafts, including woodworking, sewing, and more. And they also hope to kind of create a arts district for our community around that area, that near the triangle. And the last but not least, safe organized spaces. We want to bring attention to what they do too, because they've been a great partner with us to help clean up our area and keep an eye on the encampments in the area that they serve. They're a nonprofit and they advocate for their unhoused residents, but also to improve our neighborhoods. They're comprised of formerly homeless, currently unhoused people. And they've assisted us in cleanups, and they've gone into their areas and cleaned up bags and bags of trash. And they also provide services, jobs, and some services like showers and laundry and healthcare, and some training and moving services for them to sustain themselves and keep them safe, the area safe, to help reduce the fire danger and improve watershed health. So I hope you get involved about the that we have going on here, and turn this over to Sue.
So as you can see from this beautifully done overview of all of this environmental and environmental adjacent organizations, we are up and running in El Sobrante. We have a lot going on for all kinds of different interests. Could you go to the next slide, please? So this slide is really starting, sustaining, and building environmental action. And so I think that we can take it as read that we already have strong social ties and social capital. And by the way, the Firewise community is also something that is adding to this, particularly, I think we've had 3 Firewise communities set up in El Sobrante so far. And so if you're in Firewise, could you please raise your hand? I can see several members. All right. And so that's also part of building community. We've been taking first steps. We're making visible differences already. The purple dots are the places where I'm going to be concentrating. We're going to be looking at connection with nature and a little more about our own biodiversity, a sense that action is needed and will be effective. In other words, credible hope. And also finally understanding of decision-making structure, governance bills, and who and how to lobby. So we're going to start with connection with nature. So I'd like you to, could you take the next slide, please? So this is a Google Earth view of where we are. And those of you who are lucky enough to have a laser pointer, see if you can find where your little house is on here. Give yourself a moment to get orientated. Yeah, that's where our neighborhood, that's the La Colina.
Asian, so I'm like here.
Right, okay. Well, I think there were 3 of them, right? They're so stealable, like I can never give these out in class. So you can see from this that we have an enormous amount of green space. And how many of you live at the edge of wildlands where you really only have a very short walk until you get into green space? Could you go next slide, please? So this is a picture that I took up above.
Good, Mom.
And so I'd like you, this is basically shows the kind of, can I actually have this place of the chair? So this is some native vegetation here. This is coyote brush. We live in an ecoregion, the California coastal sage, chaparral, and oak woodland. We have some introduced species here. The eucalyptus groves are actually not natives. And Rose in a moment is going to talk a little bit about that. And we also, of course, have grazing cattle, which actually have quite an impact. And Rose will be talking more about that as well. I'd like you to just take a moment to show each other on your phones your favorite local shot. I have a couple up here. Could you go to the next slide, please? Could you just share with your neighbor like your favorite local shot of some wildland thing, like if you've got an animal recently, or some view, or a sunset, or something like that. It's easy to find. This is our neighborhood tree, by the way. This one here.
Yes.
Wow.
Now.
That was a fun exercise. Oh my God.
These pictures here, this one here is, you can see the smoke in the skies, which is one of the downsides of our gorgeousness. And this is my personal house with a lot of natives in the garden, and that's my dog. We would like to come to them. And she is actually a piece of she's an introduced species in the ecosystem, formally introduced. Could you go to the next slide, please? So I'd like to think about how resilient is our own local ecosystem, and you almost certainly know a lot more about this than you think. So what I'd like you to do now, this probably reminds you of your 7th grade science classes, which is a complete coincidence. You've got a 7th grade science teacher. And I'd like you to, if you have post-it notes or your neighbor does, write down some animals that you, and maybe plants that you particularly like. And then you're going to go slap them up on the glass over there. And I've got some pens and we can start to make a few links. So I'm going to give like 5 minutes to just write down like mountain life. I've got, so you can start sitting near to the glass. Back out the way so we can get to it. So you get pieces of your animals and the plants up here. Anything that you know.
One per
Thing. Yeah.
one per animal?
One per sheet. Per post-it sheets. Now, and there's some post-its over here. Anything else that you know of, and I've got. You can put them wherever you think they go. Excellent. Okay. Yeah, push them, you know, that's the way you think they go.
It's the usual things that I see more of them. Wow.
So that's different. So when you put an animal on one sheet, kind of slap it up. We have any raccoons?
Thank you.
Exactly right. It doesn't matter. How are you doing?
Go up.
Is that really okay?
Yeah. It's better than what's the.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So when you put up a problem of this organism.
Yeah, I don't know.
Turn around. Okay, well,
Yeah, I would go to the loop to fill out activities. And the neighbors, you know, the neighbors always. The neighbors. The neighbors.
Finish working out your post-it notes and please sit down and then look towards this amazing thing. So the point of this exercise, if you wouldn't mind taking your seats again, please.
I'm sure that's.
So the point of this exercise, even really with just group thing, we've come up with a gazillion different things. And if we were going to be here forever, we could actually put energy flow going in a million different directions, because all of these things eat at least one or two or three or maybe a gazillion kinds of different prey. Or they eat loads of different plants, or sometimes they just eat whatever they can find. The point is though, how resilient is an ecosystem that has all of these organisms in it? Because if you take out a fox, is the whole thing going to collapse? Or is there going to be, are there going to be other ways for creatures to either be predated or eaten or to eat? The more things that you have in an ecosystem, the more diverse it is, the more resilient it is. And that actually goes to all kinds of different things. The more diverse systems are, the more that they can recover from various different shocks. So the idea that one species disappearing means a total collapse of, like African safari, African savanna ecosystems, thankfully, just isn't true. So some of these do have quite a big knock-on effect. And Rose is going to be talking, I think, about some native and introduced species. So I'm going to, could you go on to the next one? So what I wanted you to get from this thing is that you have a relatively resilient and very varied ecosystem that includes native and introduced species. This next slide is about where we live, which is on the wildland-urban interface. And it's beautifully seen from here. By the way, if you don't know about Sobrante Ridge, it's gorgeous. How many of you have been up there? It's just like a little patch of paradise. And so I was on a kind of a cloudy day, and it was like this beam of sunshine illuminated this housing estate, which I think is the one right next to Lake Ridge. Like God, it was like shining just on this little place. But it illustrates perfectly how close we are to nature and how close nature is to us. And so that has benefits for us. There are many benefits from nature. And I'd like you to have a quick think about what some of those benefits to you might be. What do you see as some of the benefits of living right near to nature? What should you say?
Air quality. Fresh air.
Fresh air. What about
Good
water?
water.
Good water? What else?
Opportunity to exercise.
Okay, how many of you do use the outdoor space for hiking or other outdoor, does anybody mountain bike? Okay, anybody, well, I'm not gonna ask about anything else you do outdoors.
Dog walking.
Dog walking, thank you.
When the wind is down, fine.
Right, and so just being able to get out into nature.
Biodiversity.
Say it again.
Brings biodiversity. Right, yeah.
Anything else that nature does for you? You've got psychological benefits, you've got exercise, clean air, clean water, what else? In a rather practical sense, actually. I am sure that my health,
Blood pressure lowering.
right, absolutely. It's also quite good for focusing and people who are ill, it makes a difference to recovery. But on the much more practical side, I live on Linden Lane, which has kind of a little canyon below it. And my neighbors have really serious problems with landslides and their property starting to wash away. And trees will, of course, help to prevent erosion. So that's a very significant sort of service that the ecosystem offers. So land stabilization is a big deal. Keeping it cooler, say it again, and absolutely, and keeping it cooler because the transpiration of trees makes the shade of trees significantly cooler than ordinary shade. So those are many of the ecosystem services. I think somebody might have mentioned pollination and for pollinators, because when you think about the produce section of the supermarket, most fruits and non-root vegetables and non-grains are actually pollinated by insects. And so that's a huge benefit to our economy.
Bees and honey and allergies.
Say again?
Bees and honey and allergies.
Yes, exactly.
Soil remediation.
Yes, exactly, yes. So this book was one of the first times I became super aware. Please go on to the next slide with the circle on it. So this is ecosystem services that are offered. I mean, basically, you guys are all sophisticated enough to know that without data, without nature, we are, we're part of nature and we wouldn't be around. So this is some of the ecosystem services, but there's an economic value to it. And this is a nice way to talk about environmental issues across the political spectrum. This is called What Has Nature Ever Done for Us? And this is a riff on the Monty Python skit of what have the Romans ever done for us? Apart from education, which is rains, clean water, sewers, sewers, usually the same house. Anyway, where were we? Let's just stay there then. We didn't talk about some of the threats that we afford to nature, because we have lots of benefits from nature. Could you go back a slide, please? So in the red, the threats that we pose to nature, what do those strike us? Fire. And lightning caused fire is a thing, but it's very rare. We're going to, Donna's going to be talking a little bit about fire with the Ohlone peoples, right? A little bit about they would start fires every 5 to 10 years.
I think that's something most people are aware of, the Indians in general.
Right.
Practice fire to clear out areas, trees, to help grasses grow, native grasses.
So fire is an interesting thing because when it's not regular, then it can be devastating to both wildlife and to humans. But when it is a fairly regular kind of thing, it somewhat changes the ecosystem to some benefit.
A lot of species are dependent on that kind of regular fire.
And we're actually disturbance adapted ecosystem, which is another reason that we can feel reasonably optimistic about the beautiful ecosystem around us. The other threats we pose to nature, what else comes to mind? Absolutely. The number one reason that species are becoming endangered, absolutely. And not just habitat loss, but fragmentation. I'm hoping that none of you have been in accidents which are crossing St. Pablo Road, but it's a serious problem. And it's a problem for the deer as well, obviously.
And the turkeys. Right. So habitat fragmentation by roads, by urban areas, by agriculture, all of that is a bit of a problem. And that's one of the reasons why gardening with natives, helps make corridors for some kinds of wildlife. Other threats that we pose to nature. What else are you reading about? So again, global warming, climate change. Absolutely. Anything else? Toxic waste. Yes, pollution, air pollution, water pollution. Any other things that you can think of? Yeah.
Well, in fact, these homes and fences around them are themselves fire hazards if they're not fully protected.
Right, and
So
fencing
they
itself.
become a source of more fire.
Right. And fencing itself also inhibits wildlife movement, sometimes for the good, especially stunts, just saying. Yeah,
Just want to add one more invasive species.
absolutely. I think it's the number 2 cause of species becoming threatened. Thank you.
That can be plants, animals, plant diseases like fungi. We all move those things around places that are not adapted, and the local plants don't have a defense.
So around here, some invasive species would be, what are some invasive species? Eucalyptus,
Most of our grasses,
the anapgrasses. You wanted to mention the feral cat.
feral cats are invasive. Let's be honest.
Could you go next slide, please?
Poisons.
And the next slide.
Next one.
Next slide, please. Okay, so Rose, would you like to go ahead and take the one, please? He's doing these slides, so.
Hi, Ms. Rose. Sue introduced me as being, I'm an ecologist for the East Grand Region Park District, but today I'm wearing a different hat. I am here as a Sobrante resident. So, just talking about what I'm talking about. So I'm focusing on a lot of wildlands, on this particular topic, part of the presentation, and why we have such a, I'm fortunate to live in such a diverse area, and some of the things that you should go check out and enjoy, and also protect in the area. Okay, so these are all photos that I've taken in the area. So in the top left one here, you can see our watershed. So this is the San Juan Reservoir, and this is looking down from the top of Tilden and Woolworth Peak area, looking down towards El Sobrante. We're kind of a little bit more, you have to turn a little bit more counterclockwise to see El Sobrante, but it's a good view of the watershed. And you can see how diverse it is, even in this area. So we have coyote brush in the foreground. There's grassland. There is a woodland over there. So there's a lot of different ecosystems happening across our landscape. We mentioned Sobrante Ridge. So we've got pallid manzanitas here. That's our beautiful pallids that are endangered species. They're fire adapted. Species of manzanita, they need fire to reproduce. You can see them up on Sobrante Ridge, go check them out. They're absolutely gorgeous, especially in the winter. They're very important for pollinators because they put out flowers when a lot of other species don't have anything to offer. So, bumblebees are very reliant on different species. So check those out in like December. They're putting out flowers. They're gorgeous. So I guess I'll tie it in here. This is also Sobrante Ridge. So as I said, it's a fire adapted species. This photo in the bottom middle there. One thing we're doing is we're actually creating burn piles and trying to encourage germination of these plants that are in the latent seedbed by creating on fire, because suffering from a lack of disturbance of fire. Let's see what else we got. We got oak woodlands here, and that's my dog right there. Got these beautiful oak woodlands next to open grasslands. Grasslands are incredibly important ecosystem in our area. The things that rely on grasslands need vast amounts of it to make their living. Let's talk bumblebees, hugely important. They're extremely effective pollinators, far more effective than introduced European honeybees. Our bumblebees are better at pollinating our natives than anybody else. In fact, things like buckeyes rely on them because European bumblebees can't pollinate buckeye. It's actually toxic to them. Bumblebees are the main pollinators for buckets, so that beautiful photo that I was going to see there's one side, but that beautiful photo that Sue had earlier in the presentation, is that buckeye and flower, so. Bumblebees are like, yes, yes, please. And other things like hawks need vast open areas of grassland for their hunting. And they love these ecotones where you get two different ecosystems next to one another. Why? Because prey likes to go into the trees, come out to the grasslands, back into the trees, back and forth. You find a great deal of diversity where two different ecotones meet.
Hey, Rose, did I just point something out to people? Could you go back one slide to the triangle slide? So on this slide, there's something called iNaturalist, and would you like to just briefly mention that?
Yeah, it's an app on your phone that you can download. You can have it with you when you're doing your walks. And you can take, you can do one of two things. I use it two ways. Number one, if you don't know what something is, you can take a photo of it and it will help you identify something. And then other people who have local expertise in plant knowledge or plant, animal, insect will help you identify it. If you take a photo of it, if you want to know what it is. And or you can look at other people's recordings and see what they have found in an area. So you can open up iNat and say, I'm at Sobrante Ridge, Wildcat Canyon, in downtown El Sobrante. What have people found here? And you can see what organisms are on the record. And to help you identify it yourself in the future, you're like, I saw that.
Thank you, Sue.
Yeah. So it's a great resource. Related to it is Seek. So iNat and Seek kind of go together. It's called Seek. Okay, yeah. So that one's more. That one helps you identify things more quickly. iNat is more of a citizen science, like reporting number of observations. So from Seek you can get to iNat and post things. All right, what else we got here? That last one back. Yeah, another cool tree that's out there that I was going to mention is these are black oaks. We're one of the few areas in western Contra Costa County that has black oaks. They're what? Black oak. Fergus Pelagia. So there's a grove of them up at the top of Kennedy Grove, and it's called the Black Oak Root Trail. Big surprise. The trail named after them, but I was like, no way, there's black oaks up there. There are, and you'll find them all throughout this the San Pablo Dam Road. If you drive it, I drove it in traffic today. I was a passenger, so I got to hang my head out the window like a Labrador, and I'm like, there's one, there's one.
And why are they so special?
They're more associated with the Sierras and the footnotes of California. There are some mountain briones in Northeast County, but this, to my knowledge, may be the westernmost occurrence of black oaks that we have in the Bay Area. Very cool.
And they also have apparently particularly edible acorns for Bologna's people.
Yeah. So historically, I've been told that black oak is the best tasting acorn on fair within the different species of oaks. So it's very likely that the reason we have so many in this particular area may be because of the price put them there intentionally. So that brings me to the next point. It is these landscapes, nature. We are part of nature. These landscapes have been stewarded by native folks since time immemorial, and for better or for worse, we now told that. How can we be stewards? What are the actions that we can take, and what are the consequences of them so that we can make informed decisions? Because no action is in itself a choice and has consequences. So we'll put that down here.
No action is
an action. Taking no action has consequences. Like there are management implications to that. Things change, plants grow. Just because you do nothing doesn't mean things stay static. These are dynamics that change over time. Okay, next slide. So this is an interesting wildlife corridor graphic, so Sue was talking about, and you know, have we ever did animal collisions on San Pablo Dam Road? The reason is, this is one of the last connectivities right here. It's in between Wildcat and the open spaces on the other side of the reservoir. Right there, that's Kennedy Grove. And that's because the reservoir itself is a barrier, and then our development is a barrier. So there's a bottleneck right there. Something to be aware of. All right, next slide. This is changes in El Sobrante over time. So the slide on the left is from 1939, when both Wildcat and Tilden were grazed. This is the property, parcel line in between Wildcat and Tilden. So this is the whole area when it used to be grazed. And then you can see in 2012, the same vantage point. Wildcat is still grazed to this day, Tilden is not. And look at the difference that, what is that? 40 years has been, 60, 70 years has made. Tilden is now vegetated. That's both native and non-native species, whereas Wildcat, far more grasslands to this day because of grazing activities. So disturbance regimes in action.
But it doesn't necessarily, just because there's some grazing, doesn't necessarily mean a collapse of an ecosystem.
No, some areas need it. So grazing is used in modern day as a fire surrogate. These lands would have been burned for forage, for management purposes by native peoples. That burning was not allowed to continue for reasons. So the only disturbance that took its place was grazing.
And what's the impact of cattle grazing on native grasses? I mean, the native grasses survive that?
Yes,
I mean, I feel like the grazing in Wildcat Canyon is relatively sparse, at least when I see it. Yeah, it's not a lot of concentration. They kind of move them around a bit, but.
A lot depends on the intensity of the grazing.
Yeah.
2 decades ago, most of the parklands were overgrazed severely.
And you can actually see that.
it depends the density of the grazing, the timing of the grazing, how you rotate, what animal is grazing, cows, sheep, and goats. All graze differently from one another. You'll find them in different spaces, feeding on different things.
And how does these big parks use grazing now? Like I see goats out, are some of them?
Different purposes. Some of them are for management, stewardship activities, and some of them are for fuels reduction.
But you do use them.
And we use both, cattle and goats. Okay, next slide. Another view of the changes in El Sobrante over time here. So you can see, again, no development. Look at all the houses now. And then again, the amount of more grassland area versus now higher vegetation, especially you can see on this area here, these north facing slopes. Some of that's East Bay Mud, both park and private property. You'll see a lot more vegetation. Some of that is introduced species of eucalyptus and encroaching coyote brush. So coyote brush is a native, but in lack of disturbance regime, it will take over other ecosystems and you'll see type conversion. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Next slide, please. So, Don, would you mind taking us through the history?
Not sure where you got these pictures, but.
I got them off your website. I nicked
Oh,
them.
be careful when you post. Yeah, that, this top picture here, that's about 1948 or so, overlooking Hillcrest Road, looking down. There's no theater yet. You can see where the road.
Would you like a place taking?
Oh, thanks. Right here is where the theater would be built, right in here.
The park. The park, you said?
Park
theater, where we all used to watch them. Where we
Yeah.
got double headers.
This is, the Earl Flat Top Smith development. This is fun. which was built around 1948. And it's just to the west of, El Portal. It was initially called the Serpa Tract because the person who owned the property was named Serpa. But then it changed its name to Rancho Vista because their old Rancho Elementary School was right here. So, of course, that's.
Me and Maricela live in that neighborhood, and that's her house.
I swear, it's my house.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I figured it out from my house where the telephone poles are.
Not here.
We're sitting in my front yard looking down.
Yeah.
the street facing the-
These are well known, these are kind of famous development. Earl Blacktop Smith was, he built cheap houses, but, they were very influential in developing other designers to use the techniques. He built another similar, development, in Canyon Park in the early 1960s. So we have two such developments in Sobrante. And this is opening day. There's Supervisor Joya. That's me. That's Elizabeth. In 2007, that's opening day for Kennedy Grove Park. It took us longer to build that park than it did to win World War II. But it's still there. And, it was just full of ivy, and so there's been a lot of ivy removal in this area. Wow. Okay, so I just want to jump back to be giving a brief history of El Sobrante, and I want to align it with the idea of environmental change. And to do that, I think we need to go back to the Spanish incursion into California in the late 1760s and the early 1770s. The reason that Spain decided to occupy Upper California, they hadn't done it for 250 years, but they began to get concerned about other people nosing around California, getting interest in California, particularly the Russians. And so they decided to set up a series of missions. And they did that. There are a total of 21 missions in California. And the mission period lasted about 50 years. One thing they did, of course, the mission's job was to supply food to the army troops and the presidios, and of course to their own people and to the Indians that they took in. And one of the main sources of food was cattle. They brought in a lot of cattle, to feed themselves and to feed the troops. Basically beef morning, noon, and night. They brought in a lot of cattle. And to feed the cattle, they weren't happy, the padres were not happy with the local grasses. And so they imported non-native European grasses, and that's why you see even that, early years, not even summer yet, the hills are already dry. These are these non-native grasses, which are very competitive and basically there's not too much native grasses left. You can still find it, but the hills are literally covered with the non-native grasses. So that's a huge change in the local environment.
Are native grasses, do they have stayed green?
Longer, yes. Martha, yeah.
Just that, yeah, the native bunch grasses were perennials. They would live, they've seen purple needlegrass, 200 years old. They have 20-foot deep root systems, so they were much better at holding the soil on the hillsides. And the outer parts would turn brown, but the core would stay a little bit green. And so late in the summer, the cattle would go for them preferentially because they were still green. Whereas the introduced grasses all dry up. They just make lots and lots of seed and lots of pollen. Yeah, me too. And yeah, it was a huge conversion. And then Rose, correct me if I got saying anything wrong here about the grasses. Yeah, my understanding is they, oh, the hillside's better. among other things.
Another effect, of course, that we all know about, with the Spanish incursion in California and the setup of the missions, was the devastation of local Indian population. And that particularly affected the people in this area. The people we now refer to as Ohlone, people who live from Carquinez Straits down to below Monterey. Pretty large area, coastal people. But there was no single group of Native Americans here in California who were affected quite as much, quite as badly as that group, particularly in this area. During this 50-year period, by the end of this 50-year period, the mission period, which ended with the revolution in Mexico, throwing off the Spanish yoke, setting up an independent Mexico. So it reduced by the end of that period, the native population in this area was reduced to basically a few hundred. So that begins with the beginning of Mexico becoming an independent state, taking over California, taking over the Spanish properties. We begin the Rancho period. The Mexican government had little or no use for the missions. And they had no money to pay the people, the presidios and people manning the presidios and the soldiers and the government aid. And they needed money. They didn't have money, but what they had now was a lot of land, which they took from the mission. They basically dissolved the mission and gave out huge tracts of land, roughly 20,000 acres apiece, to landholders in lieu of payment. And two of the ones around here, of course, were Rancho San Pablo, which was granted in 1823 to Francisco Castro, and then to his sons, Victor and Juan Jose, in 1841, Rancho El Sobrante. And you may or may not know that the boundaries of the two grants are such that we are sitting within the boundaries of Rancho San Pablo, not the Rancho El Sobrante. The boundary of Rancho El Sobrante begins about a quarter of a mile down that way, on San Pablo Dam Road. And several years ago, we put up a couple of signs on either side of the dam road to mark that boundary line.
So it was called El Sobrante even back then? El Sobrante.
Rancho El Sobrante. I'll get to that in a second, but the first knowledge that we have of any business using the name El Sobrante here in this area was 1939. That was a little dairy that was on their milk line. But before that, there was very little consciousness of a community called El Sobrante. Even the biggest business in town was the Richmond Farm Creamery on Clark Road, well within the boundaries of El Sobrante. But no one would have recognized that. So they named it the Richmond Farm Creamery. That was their main market. Yeah, sort of. It's basically when you look at an old Mexican map with the grants, with each rancho, between them, you see the word Sobrante. And all that really means is it's unclaimed. This is land that's unclaimed. When the brothers Castro claimed the Rancho El Sobrante, it was already surrounded by existing grants. So there was just one big word there, the Sobrante. Let's just call it Rancho El Sobrante. You got to call it something. So,
it's my understanding Manol was part of the Martinez, right? Their high-ranking officer of the Presidio that was granted land, which is Manol going out towards the city of Martinez.
I believe so. Anyone from Manol? I know that the Manol grant butts up right against the El Sobrante grant. But I believe, yes, I think Martinez. Yeah. Okay, okay, we got the Rancho period. It's only 25 years long. It's a pretty short period from 1821 to 1846, the beginning of the Mexican-American War. So this is a short period. Did you think that the dissolution of the missions was a good thing for the Indians? It really wasn't. They at least had some protections provided by the missions. Once the missions were dissolved, the Indians had 50 years had dissolved a lot of their relationships to their own people. They didn't think it well. Most of them drifted on to the existing ranches. So you have this rancho period with a lot of Indians acting as ranch hands and cowboys. All that begins to come to an end in 1846 with the beginning of the Mexican-American War. 1848, the end of the war, California becomes a military possession of the United States. 1849, the gold rush, waves of people coming in, lots of Americans, with people from all over the world. And then 1850, statehood for California. All of this has a tremendous effect on the rancheros who own these pieces of property. They're subject to all kinds of legal problems because all kinds of people, squatters, are claiming pieces of their land. In our history center, we have a map dated 1909. That says this is the final map of the Rancho El Sobrante, and we determined that all the names on this map are the legitimate owners of these parcels of property. And from 20,000 acres, Patricio Castro, the son of Victor, owns about 100 acres, and that's all that's left. Patricio Castro lived off what is now Castro Ranch Road. And that's where he gets this name. That's the end.
What are some of the oldest buildings in El Sobrante?
We don't have that many really old buildings. There's in front of the that stable over on the Valley View. There's a little building there. You hardly notice it or anything. That dates to the 1880s. Yeah, that was the and he was a German immigrant, and he actually provided food and entertainment and stuff for the people who came out on the train. Didn't mention the train, but
So would you be able to just quickly take us to, I guess, the wall and then?
yeah. San Pablo Reservoir built 1921, taken over by East Bay and Mud, 1923. Slow growth up until the war. World War II, big jump in population between 5,000 and 7,000 people by 1950. And for the first time, you have real efforts to incorporate. This is frustrated by two important factors. Number one, the city of Richmond is annexing property early in 1950 in the center of El Sobrante, particularly in the area which now covers the De Anza High School in that area. And that gradually grew over the years until probably about half of El Sobrante is in Richmond. The other problem was it was never that popular. The idea of incorporating was never popular among El Sobrantians. People didn't come out here for the same reason that attracted a lot of other people. This is not a company town. Richmond's a company town. Hercules, Pinole, company town. Richmond had Standard Oil. They had the powder works over in Hercules and everything. People came there to get a job. People didn't move out here to get a job. People came out here to get a place to live and do what they wanted to do. And they like the fact that it's rural. That rural feel has been kept. So now what we have is a kind of an odd hybrid community consisting of a city, Richmond, in the center, surrounded by an unincorporated county area. But as far as we're concerned, And the Chamber of Commerce is concerned, it's all Sobrante.
Yeah, thank you so much.
It is beautifully written, book by Young Baston, and also there's the Sobrante Historical Society. It's just across the-
Free Saturday, get four, I'm usually there.
So in the interests of moving us along fairly quickly, could you please go to the next slide? So this is a kind of a quick summary of a little bit of what we've learned so far. How is our local nature doing? What more could we do? And this is going to be different for everybody. Each of you will have your own thing that you feel especially strongly about. Could you go to the next slide, please? So I'd like to now introduce you to some really cool stuff. I love data. I like finding patterns in numbers and stories in statistics. And I want to point out to you this website called ourworldindata.org. This is from the University of Oxford. And that is where I'm going to be taking most of my data from. And I have done this very deliberately because I've looked over this website. It is sponsored, but it has proper references to academic papers. It's carefully written. It's sponsored by a reasonable group. The University of Oxford is generally thought to be, you know, sort of all right. Plus it's near to where my dad lives, so. And the other place that's very cool is called Visual Capitalist. So if you're interested in looking at beautifully done and also well-researched data, try them. But I'm mostly going to base it off of this book and from ourworldindata.org. And Hannah Ritchie is the author of this book, and she also is the co-editor of Our World in Data. And she's only 30 years old, which is like, oh, what was I doing at 30? Not this. So I'm not going to take you through all of these, but I want you to know that you can find lots and lots of very interesting graphs and disaggregation of data. And I'm going to take you on a journey through some of it. Next slide, please. So the first thing I want to be very clear about, it is urgent. Doom and gloom aside and crazy stories aside, this graph here is the business. And you can see here that we do not have time to waste. The rate of warming in the past 15 years has been 40% higher than warming since the 1970s. And I'm sure that you have seen in the newspapers recently that dangerous heat is surging. And a lot of, I keep on my cell phone the weather for Jacobabad in Pakistan, and it has been above 120 degrees. This is a very poor area of the world. People are dying of the heat. And a lot of Pakistan, India, sub-Saharan Africa, people are starting now to, it's literally becoming too hot to live. It is urgent for us in a much less life-threatening way, but nonetheless pretty awful. And that is that homeowners insurance is being denied to some extent because of climate shocks. And there was an article in the New York Times quite recently about that. And I don't know about you, but I'm pretty anxious about this whole thing. And that's one of the things that Firewise is trying to address. Next slide, please. So I was told to read this article, World Scientists Warning Interactions, Local to Global. And this article just shocked me to death, really. This was written by a whole load of scientists from across different disciplines. And I took out a few quotes. We forcefully recommend priority actions and resource allocation to avert the worst of the climate and nature emergencies. Massive upscaling and acceleration of these actions and collaborations are essential before irreversible tipping points are crossed in the coming decade. Our biggest challenges are not technical, but social, economic, political, and behavioral. Over the next decade, we have a stark choice to demonstrate the very best of our natures, cooperative, innovative, wise, and ethical, to learn from mistakes and create better societies, or to go down with both a bang of conflict and a whimper of bickering, entitlement, and self-interest. The choice is ours. The action or inactions of individual leaders in government, communities, and businesses in this decade will be remembered darkly and hopefully kindly.
Everything we know and love is at stake. This was in a scientific article with about 3 pages of closely typed references. Next slide, please. However, even though there was that terrifying look at the kind of hockey stick curve of temperature and carbon dioxide, if you disaggregate data, you can sometimes find some very interesting things and possibly some hope for the future by looking for best case scenarios. So I'm going to give you a moment to just take a look at this slide and think about what it's saying. Can you find some hope in here?
What does GHG?
GDP is gross domestic product and GHG is greenhouse gases.
Yeah, I mean, that's generally positive. It says GDP is increasing, population is leveling off and emissions are decreasing.
Right. And so this is for
For
California,
California.
right? So whilst the news globally is pretty dire looking, California has some bright spots, and we have maybe things that can be, we are a leader in environmental action and policy in California. Could you click on that, please? Because it should, actually, you have to go to slideshow and then click on it, and it will reveal something. So take a look at this one. So this is for California emissions. Where would be some places where there could be the most impact or the most sort of biggest bang for the buck? Transportation, right?
That's the hardest one too.
Is that something that we have some control over? We have some personal choice. We also have things like the bike diet that John Joy is pushing.
Road diet,
The road diet.
road diet,
Use-
to allow bikes, yes.
The diet plus biking
Right,
equals
right.
a diet. So some of these things are things that are personal choices. Some of these things are going to be policy-based, and some of them are going to be policies which nudge you towards doing things which are better, both often for your health and for the environment. So active transportation, which is biking and skateboard riding and walking. All of those things are going to be both good for your health, your happiness, and for the environment. And public transportation, absolutely. Could you click on that, please? And so this one is by subcategory, and when you break it down even further, sometimes you can also see some more solutions that might jump out to you. If you're looking at, for example, agriculture, have a quick look at that. Where would there be some space for solutions there?
Eat less meat.
You're right. Take a look at that. Why would you say that?
Because livestock is the biggest chunk. Right. Biodigester energy generation,
Where's that?
or the agriculture, to take animal feed return into electricity.
Interesting.
That's your cue.
All right, would you next slide, please? So here we're now going to take a quick look at biodiversity, because that's my personal favorite theme and all about animals. And so take a look at the Living Planet Index and see what it's saying to you. Depressing, right?
This decline, average decline in monitored wildlife population.
Right, so it's a kind of a complicated number. Overall, it's trying to give a sense of how both populations and numbers of species are doing globally. And this is something that's put out by the World Wildlife Fund and Zoological Society of London. Overall, this is pretty depressing, right? Makes you think you better go on safari right now so that you can see the last dusty line before it, pops off and dies. Could you click on that, please? But let's disaggregate the data. Take a look here. What can you see that might offer some solutions?
stop deforesting the Amazon.
The Amazon rainforest is, and Latin America are clearly the ones where it's just horrendous, right? Where are some places where we might look for some solutions?
Well, obviously, we've stopped doing it in our own backyards.
To some large extent, right?
Yeah.
Wealthier areas of the
But who's
world.
benefiting from what's happening in the global south? So,
So,
but it's true that if we stop it where we are, or at least decrease the decline, then that means we can do it other places too. Exactly, if we want to.
so there is some push here for richer countries. If we give a toss about what's happening elsewhere in the world, which we all do, or we wouldn't be here tonight, then maybe we want to start trying to push some policy to actually get the American government to fund and companies to fund stuff that is going on in less wealthy countries to save their biodiversity. And there are many things that may actually do
some
that.
things that are being determined.
Say again?
Or defund some
It's
disruptive.
it's a complicated knot, but it does suggest that there are some things that can be done. Could you click again, please? Okay, I want to point out the rhinos. These were taken at Etosha National Park in Namibia when I stayed up really, really, really late one night. And the rhinos are making a huge comeback in Namibia. And the way that they've done that is through community conservancies, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And by involving local people in there, by having them be valuable economically. And they've made such a comeback that they have to secretly ship them all over Namibia because they're overpopulated the park, which is crazy cool. And this is an example of a solution that is hidden by the data as a whole, because in Tanzania, they're doing really badly. Overall, it looks like rhinos are doing horribly, but in Botswana and Namibia, they're doing much better, and there are reasons for that. Wildlife is making a comeback in Europe. I'm very happy to see how well the beavers are doing, and I'm going to be going over there shortly to check it out for myself, because there's rewilding initiatives in Europe, which just, they just light me up, it's just so wonderful to see like nature coming back again. And if you go to London, you go to Hyde Park has now been almost completely rewilded. They've stopped mowing grass, and there's now in England a no-mow May. So that you are supposed to leave your grass, and it provides habitat, and as Rose was saying, it's incredibly important habitat. So keep going to the next slide, please. So this is another reason it's worth acting now. This is from the US Climate Resilience Tool. And I'm going to give you a moment again to take a look at this and see if you can figure out what this is saying. This was suggested to me by Rose. So this is for communities, this isn't about animals. And this is like a story. Anybody like to tell us a little bit about what this is saying?
Wait till it's too late to get it from that loss.
Right,
No.
You invest in it, it might make a difference.
yes, yes. And this is based on a fair amount of research. And actually the thing that makes us the most resilient to shocks, which are going to come, change is the only constant thing. We will have a variety of different things, whether it's wildfires, extreme temperatures, or whatever. If we both invest to build resilience, have all of the community connections, then our response is likely to be quick, effective, and will include everybody. And this is most potently illustrated in the canvassing we did with the Firewise group, where we found quite a few neighbors who will need help evacuating that we would not have known about before.
But it looks like it doesn't take a lot of investment, it just takes a little bit of investment.
I mean, you need to use science to figure out where are the things that have the biggest bang for the buck. Where do we prioritize? Where do we put the most money and all that to make the biggest difference? Next slide, please. So I basically looked at all of this stuff and tried to put something together in a kind of a list of the things I think that we really should do. And I've color coded them. Stuff that is policy, tax, money, lobbying is in red, and stuff which are individual environmental actions I've put in green. And of course, the two things overlap. Burn less fossil fuels is the number one thing. And carbon pricing and making sure that carbon, I can't remember what it's called, where you can, like if you take a flight, you can buy carbon
offsets.
carbon offsets. There has just in today's New York Times or yesterday, a talk about how to improve the quality of those carbon offsets. But that is a way of funding what's going on in developing countries much more quickly than other things like foreign aid, where we're not living up to our commitments. But carbon pricing is also where the polluters have to pay, and there's incentive, it incentivizes polluting less. Driving less, walking, biking, public transit, and electrifying transit with buildings, industry, solar, wind, and nuclear. And nuclear has to be part, almost certainly has to be part of the solution, even though those of us who are old enough remember when nuclear was like a really, really bad news thing. Reducing habitat loss and deforestation. And to do that, the most important thing we can do is to eat less meat, especially beef. To reduce food waste from farm and including from fridge to fork. A lot of domestic waste takes place in our own kitchens. And we need to figure out ways to increase crop yields globally. This means, yes, we sometimes will need to use fertilizers, artificial as well as organic. Organic is not the only answer that we need to feed the world. We need biodiversity-based management of working land so that they can be used from nature as well as for us. And that includes things like shade-grown coffee, where the ecosystem, the tropical ecosystem, can be at the same time as you're getting a cash crop from it. And organic bananas, by the way, another example. Pay farmers in poor countries to preserve forests. Lobby for wildlife corridors and connectivity. There's going to be a new one, again, within the last couple of days, was reported in the LA area, a huge conduit for wildlife to cross in the Santa Ana Mountains, I believe. And using gardens, your gardens as habitat. Save sea life and fisheries. Eat sustainable seafood only. The Monterey Bay Aquarium is a world leader in this, and they have a website that you can very quickly check out, and an app on your phone when you're actually at the fish restaurant. You can be one of those people. But even by asking your waiter, is this sustainably caught? It puts pressure on the restaurant to try and make the stuff is properly.
Does that mean farm days?
Sorry?
Does that mean farm days?
No. No, I can't.
They
answer
rate
that.
both. They rate both wild caught and farmed, and it's called
Thanks,
Seafood
Mama.
Watch.
Yes, yes. Seafood Watch is the name of the app. And there's a lot of legislation and enforcement that needs to be done there. And improving and preserving soils with regenerative agriculture, permaculture, and gardening practices is also super important. There's massive amounts of resources on those, including the gigantic papers that I wrote on that, which also have lots of resources in them, just in case you're wondering if this is scientifically based.
Is this available to us?
Yes, you can, the QR code at the bottom will allow you to access the entire slideshow.
We need to do that now then.
Well, there's one at the end as well. Keep going, please.
Okay. Thank you.
I wanted to give you a quick little bit of fun here, because it's not all like being incredibly worthy and only eating like sticks and twigs. And you can also travel for, yes, I know the carbon footprint, but by the offsets. Because going to places like Namibia and like Botswana and other countries where they have a real need for foreign investment is a way to make it economic for local people to preserve their own wildlife and wildlife habitats. And when I went to Namibia, I was expecting really to see, like I said before, the last dusty lion. And it was amazing to see what was actually going on and the amount of people involved and how you can turn things around from farmers being frightened of cheetahs that are eating their sparse goat herds to being champions of cheetahs because the Cheetah Conservation Fund found ways to provide them with guard dogs. And you know, there was just some really innovative stuff that they were doing. So these are some pictures from the trip that I took with the Dragonfly project that I'm a part of, with Namibians providing a lot of the education to us. This was an ecologist. These are jobs desperately needed in Namibia. This man is also setting up, so he's an educator with the Cheetah Conservation Fund, and he's sponsoring this thing called hippo rollers, which is a way to get water to very distant villages without kids having to get to school exhausted from carrying water in cans. Places like, if you want to travel, make sure that you travel with a travel agency that really pays attention to both the ecology and does more than recycle their plastic bottles, that invests in local communities. I traveled with Exodus and it was incredibly cool. It was amazing. And there's going to be an exhibition of the photographs I took. I think maybe there may be one at the library soon. And this is one of the cheetahs there. Next slide, please. So many people, policies, and non-profits are already fixing the world. Oh my gosh, it is amazing. Let yourself be lifted up by it. I want to point out the state of California Governor Newsom's plan to achieve net zero emissions is actually pretty cool. And there's lots and lots of other things here to hopefully inspire you. Next slide, please. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are just wonderful. And our world and data keys into these, and there is actual progress being made. We do live in a time where people are getting healthier and wealthier worldwide. Some places more than others. There's still a lot of need, but it's not a time to be downcast because lots of people are doing something real. Next slide, please. I wanted to just let you take a look at this really cool, weird rainbow thing, in case you're wondering about how the whole global warming thing works. So these are the sources of greenhouse gases here: electricity, food, agriculture, and land use, industry, transportation, buildings, and other energy-related emissions. And of course, there's also natural sources like actually breathing, for example, producing carbon dioxide, farting, digesting the food, etc. Goes into the atmosphere. The stuff that takes it out of the atmosphere is land sinks, which is things like weathering and trees and plants. Coastal and ocean sinks, the oceans absorb lots and lots of CO2. If you have an unbalance, that's where you get a buildup of greenhouse gases. And Project Drawdown is concentrating on drawing this down by increasing these things and decreasing those things. And they have all these science-based solutions that you can kind of read through. It's a beautiful website, and it gives you some real ideas for what you might like to get involved with. Next slide, please. This slide really is about policy being sexy. I didn't really want to put the policy is sexy on there, but basically, this is how many human lives were saved by these different kinds of policies, and it's millions of people. You guys may have heard of the London fog, right? In fact, there's brands called London fog. And if any of you have been to London, you will know that London does not have fog anymore because it wasn't fog, it was smog. And it was so bad that thousands and thousands of people died from it. The buildings in London when I was a kid were black from that smog. And my dad remembers when you basically could barely see your hand in front of your face, flights would be cancelled, blah, blah, blah. And so then the Clean Air Act came in and massively changed the atmosphere. And now they have the tax, the congestion tax, and London is just like clear skies now. Beijing has massively cleaned up their air since the Olympics, when people there were like, wait a minute, you could do this for the Olympics, why can't you do it for us? And so policy is just super important. And the World Wildlife Fund said that it has found that the Inflation Reduction Act offers up more than 350 billion in historic investments that would set the United States on a solid path towards reaching its climate goals. including dedicated funding for home energy rebates, blah, blah, blah. This is a big deal. I do want to point out that making sure that this kind of legislation continues is one of the things that is absolutely on the ballot in November. The best thing we can do for the environment right now is what's going on in November. I'm just gonna leave it right there. Next slide, please. So now we're getting on to how to influence elected representatives. And so
money.
well, so elected representatives make policy decisions at every level of government. And you can find yours pretty easily. I've put a link up there. I would recommend, and John's going to be speaking on this in a moment, that you start with your lowest level representatives because they have fewer electors and maybe more available to you and to citizen groups than if you go straight to, say, President Biden. Work with a friend or local interest group. It's a bit scary to do this stuff, and it's a lot more fun if you can go meet with your representative and then go have lunch together, because why wouldn't you? Lobby effectively with research-based tactics, building personal relationships, appeal to shared values, do your homework ahead of time, find out what that legislator cares about, what their recent record is. Handwritten postcards, personal emails, all of those things work, but the best thing is in-person visits. If you want to get involved with others, Indivisible is a really big deal. California Enviro Voters Ed Fund and League of Women Voters are good ways to get started. Next slide, please. This is where to find environmental legislation to push. I'm really not going to go into a great deal of extra information on this. You can see it up there, but basically this is listing everything. It's beautifully sorted, but you do have to read through the legalese. And you and your friends will need to figure out what it is that you want to think about. If you're interested in goat grazing, you can literally look up goat grazing and find out what's going through Congress right now. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick example. I did this on plastic pollution. I searched for plastic pollution. I see that there's something pending. And then if I decide I really want to agree with that, I'm going to find my assembly member, Buffy Wicks. I'm going to look at her record, her platform. I'm either going to visit her, I'm going to write to her, and do it as a personal email rather than a form email. Next slide, please. So John, would you like to give us a little bit of your insight as to how to influence legislation?
Thanks. You should give a hand to Sue. So where should I stand, Ronnie? Over here?
Yes, good.
All right. You know, because I think your last MAC meeting is coming up in June, and Sue's moving home abroad. And so I just want to recognize Sue's leadership on the MAC and also the idea of putting together this great team with this great presentation. Actually, your money issue, don't worry, I'm going to talk about that. But I thought I would talk a little bit about, Sue had asked me to talk about, you know, how to influence legislators, elected officials. Before I do, I wanted to say, you know, we're so lucky to have Don Baston, the historian here, and I'm the son of a history and government teacher, so I appreciate that. One of the things I should say, when we talk about this sort of puzzle out here, city of Richmond and unincorporated area, and why is it split? When we look at a map of Richmond and see the boundaries, you can see the heart of Richmond, and you can see a little strip of land on the hilltop, then you see a little strip of land going out on Sobrante. So you see if someone knows why all these strips of land and why the boundaries of Richmond are as weird as they are. Any guess about that?
Yeah, it's what I do with the road.
I'm guessing that if there was a development over a certain number of houses, then the city of Richmond opted to annex it.
That's right. Basically, it's about development. I mean, it was a lot of the land use policies where the development wouldn't have happened. It was, if it would stay in the unincorporated area, Richmond annexed land for development. Cherry Hills being a perfect example, right? And one more recent. Prior to that, in the 60s, it was like May Valley. and then prior to that, you had Hilltop, so that's why Richmond has all these tentacles. And, and why you have this split, and why El Sobrante is cut in half, by the city of Richmond. Okay.
They didn't want Sherwood Forest?
Well, I don't know if that, it may have been that area was already developed before. So if you look at it, the areas in Richmond tend to be the newer areas. They tend to be subdivisions, right? And they tend to be the newer developments. So that's what happened because of Richmond annex and all this. And the other thing I wanted to say, and I know you acknowledged, Sue, all of the great sort of green organizations doing work in El Sobrante, and I want to turn the clock back and really acknowledge some of the first with the spawners with the work that was done, you know, and their project and the watershed project, a great nonprofit based at the Richmond Field Station. And so this site, over 20 years ago, this site was just a library and a lot of ID. And you know, there was not much. And we got together and we started using park funds to really turn this into a nicer park area. And we didn't have, now we do, but at the time we didn't really have any maintenance dollars. We just had some capital dollars. And spawners really took on the role to do the maintenance of a lot of what you see in the planting of the native landscaping here. That was all ivy, right? That reading garden was all ivy. A lot of, and spawners really is the first real organization to do a lot of this, just to acknowledge some history. I think you were around at that time, and others, and so thank you very much.
And Billy.
Pardon?
And Billy.
Yes, it was a whole, so thank you. The whole group that, you know, Mickey, you formed, which is great, just shows all the great organizations out there. So I was gonna say a few words about influencing, and, you know, stories matter, you know, your testimony matters, and I'll tell you from my different roles. In addition to being on the board of supervisors, I got to serve for 7 years as an appointee of Governor Brown to the California Air Resources Board, which is the state agency that really implements and comes up with California's climate change policies. Like, you know, we passed new laws that like require all new public transit buses starting in 2029 to be electric, and phasing them out to after I got off the board, they passed a law that outlaws starting in 2035 gasoline cars. That's all done by the California Air Resources Board. It comes out with a state plan that really regulates cars and trucks, but also develops all the climate change policies. And it is really, California is doing more than any other place in the country by far. And their scoping plan, which they just revised about a year ago, mentions a lot of the good things that Sue talked about. The good news is a lot of the things you heard about are in a plan that the state wants to do. I mean, we need to do individual action, which is really important. I also think it's really important to have government, right? Because sweeping reforms like saying no new gasoline cars after 2035 is a big deal, right? In fact, one of the rules we did at the Air District, and public testimony was really important, we passed the rules saying starting in 2027, all new water heaters had to be 0 NOx, no natural gas, all basically like heat pump. And we're now trying to work with the manufacturers. And what's important to note is these policies that Sue talks about drive technology. So guess what happened? The water heater manufacturers are now making water heaters, electric heat pump water heaters, not the coil, the heat pump, that run on 110, 120 volts, 15 amps. The technology was 220 volts, 30 amps. We had a lot of rewiring. Manufacturers already now have models that are 120 volts. So we're going to see more of that when 100 volt takes effect in 2027. That's why we made the rule out in the future, so that we give technology a chance. Same thing, I used to talk to the automakers when I was on the California Air Resources Board, and they'd all say, we know this is where it's headed. California's rule, which is adopted by other states, also gets the manufacturers to do this. And look at the technology shifts. I mean, my first electric car was the Nissan Leaf in 2013 that had 70 miles of range. My current electric car is a Bolt that has 270 miles of range, and I lease it for, well, I don't lease it, the cost of it's about the same as that Nissan Leaf. So it shows you how technology is being driven by the policies. And you can help drive the policies that then drive the technology change. In fact, the reason I think California is so far ahead of any other place is really because of the public. And we have great legislators here. I mean, Nancy, Senator Skinner, some of you, which are really great. So it's not like we need to convince too many of our Bay Area legislators, but it's also about how you use your networks to influence legislators in other parts of the state. Because there is a whole movement by the oil industry, the Western States Petroleum Association, others to sort of slow this transition down. They realized they can't stop it. First, they wanted to stop it. Now they know they can't stop it. So what do they say? Well, it's happening too fast. You know, so I think, and yes, you know, money has too much influence in the political process. The largest lobbyists in Sacramento are the Western States right now. Spend money, the Western State Petroleum Association, this fund. And so it is really important to counter that. I mean, I took a pledge a long time ago not to take any fossil fuel off money, so if I don't, no fossil fuel, no back into that. But there are, you know, state legislators that get lots of support from the oil industry, and it's about how do you move them. You know, if you look at when you're looking with the legislature, there's three groups of legislators except for that. Republicans, and no, we're going to be moderate Democrats, business moderate Democrats, and more labor environmental Democrats. So what often happens is the oil industry will lobby, they know they have Republicans, so they'll lobby the moderate Dems, because they get enough of them to side with Republicans, and that's how you then don't pass it. That is an environmental. And I think so that the idea, and I'm gonna get to how you just communicate with electeds, but is to talk to your friends in different parts of the state that may be represented by moderate Democrats. You calling a legislator in another district or calling a council member or supervisor who's not elected by your area is not too effective. Because they're gonna look what they're right? What are their, and so I say this. So when you're lobbying the board of supervisors, you know, if you know it's and you want to get a vote from the supervisor out in Brentwood, you want to talk to your networks out there, so they will talk to that supervisor. That's the first rule. It's like really talk to your representative, right? And whether it's city council or supervisors, legislators, and you know, personal stories are really important. Data is great. So let me just say, data doesn't drive policy making. If it did, we'd have half the problems we have, right? So, you know, it's telling stories that reflect the data is really telling, you know, whether it's your lobbying on need for housing for homeless. I once was at a meeting and there was a proposal to create some housing that would house people who were formerly homeless, but there was great housing. And there were people complaining about it. And by the way, the messenger is just as important as this. This woman stood up and she said, you know, your criticism of people who are homeless, you're talking about people like me. She was a resident in the neighborhood that they knew. And she said, I used to be homeless. So you're talking about people like me, and I'm a good resident. So the messenger is important too. Telling stories is important. And you know, it's way better writing a personal letter than signing on the mass emails. Now you get lots of mass emails, and that's fine. But it's not when you put effort out and it's more personalized. That means something. That means more. You know, you can call someone's office and leave a message. That's fine. A personal letter is good. You know, getting a group of you together and paying a visit to that office and talking to that elected official is also really important. And, you know, get a group who, you know, are voters in that district and talk to them. And no, you don't have to give them money, right? You're countering the money. That's what you're wanting to do. Although if you want to contribute, that's okay. Someone, you know, you make her, but what's important is the story and the communication, right? I I think it's all about making a connection and being informed and keeping it short, not a long thing. Folks' time is dealing with a lot. I'm getting a lot of emails on some subjects and fine, I did the same thing, and it's like, okay, right, I know, I put it in the right to respond. But the personal thing is really important. And I think I really want to emphasize this point in reaching out to those who really trying to convince. I mean, it's great to talk to people who are already on your side and sort of validate, thank them for what they're doing, thank them for their votes, thank them for all the good work they're doing. But then, it's that connection to others. To talk to other legislators. It's all start from the state level. Most of the environmental policies are gonna need some amount of mod dams to support that. So that's why you need to reach out to, friends in the Central Valley. For example, we can talk to their legislators in the Central Valley. So you talked about going to different places to, walk precincts with others out in the valley, and you've done that. That's all really important. For when issues come up at the city council in Richmond, talk to your representatives. I was at a meeting earlier with Sonny Labana where you get able to talk to her. If you're in the part of Richmond, talk to that person. For the county, obviously talk to me if you want to express your thoughts, and I welcome them. But I may say on so many issues, I may say, well, you need to get, you need to talk to other supervisors if you really trying to get critical mass of support. We did pass a law, supported by vote, to require all new construction, for example, to be electric. In the unincorporated area, some cities have that. But unfortunately, a court case ruled that federal law prevents local jurisdictions from regulating natural gas. So we had to suspend our ordinance and we are adopting something that tries to achieve the same thing by energy efficiency. We're hoping that court doesn't overturn the air district removal on water meters, which will take effect in a few years. I mean, like we lobby the air district, we do a lot on climate change, these kinds of things. We hear from people from all over the area. It's really important to hear that, not just people from one community. So I think that's one of the points that we.
Would you be willing to, if there is a group of people who get really interested in a particular issue and want to know kind of how to go about pushing the legislation and that, would you be willing for them to contact you?
Sure, I do that all the time. Do that. And okay,
2 hours.
that's all I want to say. That's really those are the points I wanted to make. So thank you for being here and being part of this. And this is a really good presentation, and I enjoyed listening to part of it, and I saw the slides.
So if you want to refresh that slide, that should come up with, I've been taking notes on what John said. So if you, it hasn't come up yet. Anyway.
Yeah, I have two questions.
The QR code or whatever.
Yeah, if, do the other supervisors want to hear from us if they're not in the district?
I mean, they'll hear from you, but your impact is going to be less. I mean, look, it's just how it is. I mean, they'll hear from their own constituents first. I mean, they do want to hear. It's always good to hear countywide. It's always good to hear that there's broad support for something. So that is good. If you're going to do that, try to go in with somebody who lives in that district.
So one of the questions, not really related to tenants. What is the real reason that we have such high gas prices here compared to the rest of the country, aside from the gas?
Right, sure. So, most of, I get asked this all the time. I've been debating the price of gas at the airport. That may be partially true, not fully true. But the price of gas is due to so many things. And the market, oil companies will charge what they can get. So there is a cost component. I don't have all the numbers. I get those. It's a cost component that's built in for complying with a lot of the cap and trade and Air Resources Board, standards and programs, which is what you want because that's funding, right? Our move toward electrification. So there's one of that. There's some of that that goes to the gas tax for streets and roads. But think about this for a second. you know, our public works departments, get money from the gas tax, for streets, roads. Well, guess what? Cars are much more efficient. They're actually, on a per mile basis, probably collecting this money for streets and roads, because you're getting fucked driving a car that's, it's 30 miles per gallon versus what 100 years ago gets 15. You're using less gas, and therefore you're contributing less gas tax. So just wanted to note that, it's important to remember. So, and then there is this amount, gas prices can fluctuate. So when a refinery goes offline because of a problem at that refinery, and there's a restricted supply, the price of gas goes up. It's not your fault. It's their fault. In fact, there was a refinery in LA a number of years ago that had to go down for many months due to an accident. And the price went up. And then when they came online, guess what? Exactly. They saw they could get that, and there's a whole thing in California about, there's this mysterious amount of gas prices, just state that California is higher, that the legislature's been trying to figure out, and the governor. Yeah, the governor was like, exactly. Then why we, because that was, so we know there's some due to taxes, some due to compliance with, you know, air quality standards.
Not just that.
But there's also this mysterious, plus is what they could get, right? And look, every time we hear from refineries, we pass a regulation to restrict, you know, lower pollution at the Chevron refinery, they say, what's going to increase the price of gas? Well, you know what's on the ballot in Richmond?
Yeah.
It could be $1 per dollar, maybe two, but if it's $1 per barrel, this is a very innovative tax. First time I've heard of this in the country. It could raise $60 to $70 million for Richmond because they process about 60 to 70 million barrels of crude oil.
Do you think that proposed polluters tax could withstand legal challenge?
Well, that's the interesting question. I mean, the group that really put it together, APEN, Asian Pacific Environmental Network, is very well respected EJ group in the state, and they had their lawyers look at it. I actually talked to them. They said that they looked at it and they feel, now Sharon will sue. We'll see where this goes. I don't know enough about it, but they said they feel pretty good about it, but who knows? There's always uncertainty. You know, it probably has a good chance of passing. I'm sure Sharon will spend a lot of money against it. How effective that will be, we'll see. But yeah, that's an interesting question. Always an interesting question.
For the replicating, I think that's exactly the
There's
same.
nothing that local government has done.
I thought there was a refinery near Long Beach,
In Carson, yes,
Yeah.
Carson has done something that's not exactly the same, that actually came under some challenge, yes. I haven't looked at it, I've been meaning to, but I hear it's not the same, so that, you know, everything's fact-based, but it's something similar. I'm not sure which refinery it is, but you know, Contra Costa has 4 refineries, LA has 5, but 2 of our 4 transition to, you know, diesel. Got it, okay, I'm done. All right, good.
Thank you.
And again, yeah. So, these are some bumper sticker takeaways. I'm kind of hoping that, I wish I was still staying here because I would love to get, like, instead of a book club, a policy club where we get together and we'd be like, what are we gonna like? But my bumper sticker takeaways are urgency plus realistic optimism leads to action. And that despair, cynicism, and distraction are contagious luxuries, allowing the ship to sink with all our children on it. And we all know people who feel that being cynical is the smart thing to be. And we probably know young people who feel that the world is so awful that they've written a book called Generation Dread, which is about how many young people are doing things like deciding not to have children. And I know some young people who I love very much who are in that group. It's kind of up to us, especially older people here, to do, we have the time to do something about this. Let's get on with it. People thirst to fix the world. If you want to save wildlife, you first have to make sure that the people who live amongst that wildlife are themselves economically stable, that they have jobs. It is people who are poor, desperate people do desperate things, including
killing rhinos to sell their horns, kidnapping cheetah cubs to sell as exotic pets, the list goes on. Diversity leads to resilience in a whole variety of different ways. One shoulder against an ocean liner will slowly push it out to sea, even though you may not see the effect of what you're doing right now. It's a piece of that movement. And I am so excited to see what's happening here at El Sobrante, how we have a synergy of different groups coming together. Can you advance your slide, please? I just made this because I thought it was fun. A little bit of geometry. A small nudge now or a wrench just before we hit Pothouse Earth. Next slide, please. And then this one here is about lining our arrows up and not spending time being like, oh, well, I'm not a member of Greenpeace because I'm a Sierra Club person and we have different objectives. Let's just do what we need to do. Push in the same direction because we know that the fossil fuel meat lobbies and right-wing are going to be pushing quite effectively in the other direction. So working together at a local community level is super important. Next slide, please. So this is coming right back to where we were. I do hope that you have a sense that action is needed and can be effective. I hope you feel that lovely sense of nature and sense of place, and that this has helped to build your confidence to actually take some effective action in addition to the wonderful things that you and I are already doing. And I think, and one more slide, please. And that is it. Thank you very much.
The shed tree, very willing to house people to take action.
That's like a good idea.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. Great, everybody. Thank you. Can I have the, any bits and pieces that I made about thanking? Wow, that was great. Please, yeah.